Well, good morning, church. About this time of the year, in 2009, something was happening near the Hudson that caused history to be made. Captain Sully Sullenberger and Jeff Schuyler were piloting a U.S. flight, and it was flight 1549, with 150 passengers on board, when their plane was struck with birds. And if this had been something that you could drill or could practice for, it would have been great. But the precise way this happened had never happened before. They had 208 seconds before the 150 people on board would meet certain death. 208 seconds to figure out how to do something that no one had ever been trained for. Well, at that point, the co-pilot was in control of the plane, and Captain Sully was doing the co-pilot type of thing. And immediately, the first orders that came out was, "My plane," and the answer by Jeff, "Your plane." And Jeff went into a support role, and Sully went into getting everything down, seeing what was working, reporting what wasn't working, and they couldn't think. They had to have whatever training they'd had for this moment had to kick in. When things in your life happen, bad things happen, because you're in life, you cannot prepare for it. All of a sudden, one moment you feel fine, next moment, you might find your temperature spiraling up, your blood pressure spiraling up. You don't know what's going on. Or it might be a diagnosis from a doctor that says, "This is unbelievable." Or it might be trauma from your past, or depression from deep hurts from the past. Or it could be that anxiety has slowly started to creep up in your life, and you're finding it hard to even leave your home. Or it could be Carl, that you're busy fixing your knee and it's not working like it should. There's so much that can happen in our lives that we just cannot prepare for. And it's at that point that we have to release the role that we think we need. And we need to, at that time, receive the role that Christ wants us to have. And if we will do that, we'll be able to rest in His peace. But it's hard to do that. When everything's going wrong, is it easy for you to let go of the wheel? Or is your tendency to grip it more tight? You see, we don't like to do this. Instinctively, we'll fight it. But because Captain Sully did what he was trained to do at that moment, go through everything that could have been chaos became an orchestrated picture of complete order. The air crew did exactly what they needed to do. The pilots did what they needed to do. The command came out, brace, heads down. And how many of the 155 passengers made it alive? That's the miracle. Every single one of them. I want to take you through a little sermon this morning that tells you that you can move from anxiety to assurance, that you can move from stress to success. Now, all of you know that scripture that was read for us this morning by Jordan, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. We're very familiar with that scripture, but we don't always look at what's coming on behind, because it's speaking to elders, and then it's speaking to young men. And yes, that's what it's doing, but I want to challenge you today to look at it in its entirety and to see exactly what God is asking us to do. This sermon isn't just for a church, for its elders, for its young men, for its deacons, for the members, for all of us. It's a study in anxiety as well, and how to be okay when things are not okay. So the first thing I want you to talk about, or to focus about, as I've mentioned, is release your role. Release your role. Whatever you think your role is, be very flexible if you're a Christian. Don't become very hard and fast. Yes, there are roles, and we have different things that we have to do if things are going to work out correctly. But every now and then, you might be the captain instead of the co-pilot, or you might be the co-pilot instead of the captain. You have to be flexible. You have to be prepared to do what God wants you to do. In this case, those two pilots had to trust not what they instinctively thought they needed to do, but they had to trust their training. And so this will be the path to peace that we'll see today. And I've looked at the scripture. I've had a lot of fun with it, and I've marked it up and so on. But I don't want that to detract from what you're looking at right now. How do you go about releasing your role? The first thing is to shoulder the suffering. So I exhort the elder or elders. Is that clear enough? An elder is not an elder unless he has been asked to step down as an elder, or he's been asked to step up as an elder. After that, he's an elder when he's with the other elders. The best way I could describe it for you is a school board. If you're a member of the school board, you're voted on as a member of the school board, and I have a friend that is not just a very good role in the Boone County School Board, but it's also coordinating all this area and school board members, and is in Washington quite often, backwards and forwards. And that is not too impressive to me, because I know what a school board is, and I know how it functions. If you are in a school, if you're meeting with the school board members, then you remember the school board. The moment you walk out of that office where the school board is, you're no longer a member, you're no longer on the school board. And I know this because if you talk out from anything you heard inside that school board, not only is that unethical, and not very nice, and it'll tear down that school, but it's also, did you know, it's illegal? It's illegal to do that. And this is kind of where they looked at the Bible when they put school boards together. I'm pretty sure about it. And they looked at the plurality of elders. And they realized you don't have to be an elder on your own. You're an elder when you're with the other elders. So I know we've got some very experienced elders here. And I know people have cornered them from time to time, asking them to make decisions. And if they were wise, they would do what every husband does when he's asked to commit to something. Let me check with the wife. It's a get out of jail free card. It's a gift. I saw one day a member was pushing for an agenda and got an elder one side, and this was a very persuasive member, and that elder agreed to it. And then I happened to be in with the other elders when that elder had to admit to the other elders that he'd made a mistake. And the other elders had to say, well, you're going to have to go back to her, and we can't do that. And it's so easy to do that. For me as a preacher, I find it very easy to hide behind my elders. I've probably said that to them a few times, because I really do that. Why should I put myself out in front when I've got an eldership that can help us, that can guide us? And so the elders also have to understand this is not a bad thing. This is actually a good thing. It's a combination and the collection of elders, the different temperaments, the different experiences, the different gifts that they have, spiritual gifts and non-spiritual gifts that God has put inside of them. It all comes together when they're together and they're sitting there, and it's just a different way. And the way people talk to an eldership is very different than the way they'll talk to an elder individually. So that's the first thing I want you to see. If you're going to release your role, you're going to have to learn to shoulder the responsibility. And so the word elders is also used as presbyters, pastors, shepherds, and stewards in the rest of the Bible. So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder. So there he's also saying, I'm shouldering this with you, as I know what you're going through, as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ. So you see that word so over there? Right over there, so. That points back to everything that we've been talking about, and it comes back to sufferings. So this whole theme is that we're not going to grow, we're not going to get our zeal back if we're on a mountaintop. We're only going to grow if we're in the valley. And so I want you to look at this valley. I want you to see this is where it happens, and it's a daily thing. It's not that it's ever going to end. until we breathe out our last, and then we'll get the glory that is to be revealed. Suffering of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. So Peter is trying to tell them, guys, you're not in this alone. Look, here I'm with you, here I'm with you, here I'm with you. Shoulder the suffering as a group. So just to touch base on suffering again, what we mentioned last time, starting chapter 4, verse 1, we need to have the mind that is in the mind of Christ, the mind of Christ, the mind of suffering. I give you, for 2005, I give you a New Year's resolution. And I ask you to choose happiness or pain. So pain or pleasure. And Peter uses a few things in chapter 4 that are so embarrassing, I struggle to even say it in an open audience like this. But he tells you, you can choose, and I'll just pick on one of some very bad things he mentions. You can choose alcohol, drunkenness, or you can choose pain. So if I choose the alcohol, I can numb my brain, I don't have to deal with this. Is that true? Or are you going to wake up tomorrow and see your problems haven't gone away, you've just added a headache to it. And by the way, alcohol is a depressant. So you took a depressant medication the night before, and now you're wondering why you're really not feeling good today. Just doesn't work that way. But if you chose pain, in other words, you chose to go to the gym and sweat, that would, at the end of the day, would give you the pleasure you need. And so we talked about that, and we see there's quite a lot of it. But going on to releasing the role, we also have to surrender to the Spirit. Shepherd the flock belonging to who? God's flock. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you. This phrase is mentioned a few times in the Bible. Exercising oversight. There are Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, the two ancient texts that we have. This was actually removed because shortly after the scripture, they went from elders leading in churches to a bishop, and they elevated it, and the people in power took away those couple of those two words from the original manuscript. At least that's my theory as to why it's not there, because some of the older ones do have that in there. So elders, you are shepherd in the flock of God, and you are exercising oversight. So I'm going to stop just a second over there. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 7 and 17 tell us that we have elders, but it also says they must give an answer for our souls, and it says to us that we mustn't make their job hard. So I'm asking you, as children in a home, are you making your parents' job difficult or easy? Now, parents, you might want to sit your kids down and go over this again, because this is a very important point. And I'm asking the church, when it comes to the elders, are we making their role easier or more difficult as they collectively shoulder the responsibility, release, surrender to the Spirit, which is very complicated to do, and then they have to shepherd the flock. So one of the things I'll just give you as a practical illustration that I've seen many times, I mentioned this at least one time since I've been here, that for a long time I've been in many eldership meetings. And it's because of the way I get to know the flock, and every now and then the elders need me to be inside a meeting for whatever reason. And I get to hear how they talk and make decisions. And by the way, decisions is not the most important part of being an elder. It's shepherding is the most important part. But they do have to make decisions from time to time. And then they will come out and tell the congregation, and then there'll be a sigh. And it's like, if we were there, we would never have made these decisions. And because I was there hearing all the information and the nuts and bolts, I realized if any one of us was in that room at that moment with the facts that they had, we would make the same decision. And that's just the way it works. When you have three individual people like we have here working together, it's a good thing. So exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not shameful gain, but eagerly. So you have two of the contrasting things. There'll be one more. And the last one in releasing the role over there is sharing the strength, not domineering over those in your charge, but be an example to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive an unfading crown of glory. All right, so just a couple of things to note here, just to come back on. Who is the chief shepherd? Jesus. Whose flock is it? God's flock. What are the elders doing? They're sharing responsibility as an eldership, and they're looking at Jesus, the chief shepherd, book, chapter, and verse, because Jesus is the word, on how to make decisions, because we've been given everything for life and godliness. There's nothing that the Bible speaks that happens in our lives that the Bible's not spoken about. But I really like this word unfading, especially in the ESV, because the word fading is the second, you just take the letter A off there, amartantinon, you just take the A off, and then you'll get martantinon, which means fading. So the alpha primitive reverses it. So it's the brilliant word that the ESV came up with there when it said unfading, crown of glory. But that word there for unfading, you might recognize it if you're a horticulturist. Now, you can get online and you can get this flower, the marathon flower, from California. It's grown in Southern California. It's $16. We'll give you a whole bunch and you can make a beautiful wreath out of it. And $16 is not bad, and then they ask you $25 for shipping. That was interesting. and they say it's this beautiful color, but because of nature, it might be a little bit red. So a very beautiful thing. And I made up this flower here using an AI because I wanted to get what this crown would look like. You may receive an unfading crown of glory. And in my mind, at the Olympic Games or one of those games I had back then, probably they were familiar with this crown that was made up of this flower. Has to be this flower. The Greek word is exactly the same. And it's an unfading crown. So it's wonderful to think that our elders are going to get an unfading crown. But it does challenge them because they have to release their roles. But I don't just mean the elders. I mean in everything. I mean, any one of us that finds herself in a leadership role, from time to time, you've got to be flexible. You've got to be prepared to release the role that you have. And so for that, I have an illustration. Just want to quickly show you the comparisons here. Excuse me, the negative and the positive things there. Negatively, not under compulsion, not for shameful gain, and not domineering. So instead of domineering, be an example, not for shameful gain, eagerly, and not for under compulsion, but willingly. So it's very detailed and it's very much for the elders, but any one of us can learn from this. Tuesday night, I left the building again as Monday night. It was pretty dark when I left the building. And I drove towards home and navigating the 71, 75, going towards the 275. And I did that turn there on the 275. And about that time, just as I got onto the 275, my phone rang. And I want to write some things over here that I wrote down as I reflected on this. Headlights pierce Tuesday's darkness on the I-275. Another counseling crisis? Medical emergency? No. Just my wife's voice on the speakerphone. Now listen to what was going on. See if you can pick up the three things. The kitchen's dark. The furnace sounds like a freight train. And the emergency heat, dead as January. And it all happened at once. When I got out of the car, eventually arriving at home, I thought the neighbors were busy with some kind of a hammer drill. And that was my heating system making that noise. And Darwin and I kept thinking how sorry we felt for our neighbors because the heating system was echoing under their house. It found a little empty slot there and it was booming up into their home. So normally I'm the Mr. Fix-It. And normally my wife has got the supportive role in this particular situation. But here between off-ramps, I have to give my wife whatever comfort I can as she sits with candlelight trying to throw the breakers on. Now, in your home, who generally deals with the breakers, the electrical breakers, the wives or the husbands? right? It's normally the husbands. Okay. Now Cindy's pointing to Daryl. And so Daryl, if you go to that breaker, you know what to do. You don't even think about it. And when I got home, I didn't even think about it. The kitchen lights were still off. Everything was off. But the breaker is right at my door. I opened the door. I went to the breaker, saw which one. I turned it off and turned it on. And Wayne says, I've just done a YouTube video and I've just found out that in order to get that breaker to work, you have to turn it all the way off first and then all the way on. Now, any guy here would know that's what you do. We don't even think about it. We don't even know how to tell somebody on the phone. So we got that going. Then we had the furnace that was still down. The next day, I went to my 2 tanks. I swapped it out. We've got propane tanks, and that started to work again. And I got the HVAC. I got 2 big HVAC companies online, and they were prepared to come in. But I had a friend, a Christian friend, a member of the Lord's church. He was there at 7 o'clock in the morning. He was there. And he had this little tiny heater that he was offering. And he's also the one that we call to fix things. And so he started to do this. And he said, I know a guy. He said, but you've got to pay cash. Don't ask for a receipt. Don't ask for too many questions. And your HVAC will work. So about 9 o'clock, I had the guy there. And everything was working fine. But all of us had to release our roles. You get what I'm saying? You have to release your roles. Go back to school member boards. They have to release their expertise. They're on the school board, not because they're presidents of a bank or because they work HVAC. They're there because people saw something in them that if they're in that group, it'll work. And that goes to everything. And I'm talking about releasing stress now. If you want to release stress, you've got to release your role. You've got to release what you think you've got to do and get a team around you, people that know what they're doing. And don't be embarrassed about it, as we'll see. In order to receive, you have to release. And so that's the next part. Many years ago, I watched some monkeys in Africa, and it was on a movie. I can't remember there's a few nice titles of some movies, but I think it was called Beautiful People. In any case, there's this big ant heap, and there's a little hole in it with some pumpkin pips. And there's a bushman watching from off on the side there, and he wants to catch this monkey because this monkey will lead him to water if he does it right. And he needs water. He's run out of his water source. So he takes pumpkin pips, and he leads them for quite a little bit of a trail, and he puts a little hole just big enough for a monkey to squeeze its hand in. And he puts a mother load of the pumpkin pips inside this ant heap that's hollow in the inside. Sure enough, the monkey comes along, finds the pumpkin pips, follows it along, eats one at a time. They love pumpkin pips. Puts its hand in and grips a whole bunch of the pumpkin pips. And guess what happens? That monkey can't get its hand out. Because it's stuck, because it's holding on to the steering wheel of the car. It's holding on to wanting to cure itself. It's holding on to whatever stress is there in its life. Doesn't want to let it go. You've got to release in order to receive. Well, that bushman took the monkey, tied a rope around its leg, tied it to a tree, and put salt down. The monkey ate the salt. The monkey got really thirsty. And when the monkey was completely thirsty, he let the monkey go, and the monkey ran straight to its water, and this man followed it, and everything was good. So you understand the concept. In order to receive, you've got to release. So the first thing is release your roles, release what you instinctively think you need to do, trust your training. In our case with the elders, trust book, chapter, and verse. Don't go away from that. And watch how things work. So here's verses 5 through 6 on how you receive his rule. And there's going to be a lot of humility in order to do this, in order to listen to what God is saying to you. This morning I talked to one of the members and I said, we're just about ready to start the live streaming and things like that. And it's going to be tough. And if you help me, we'll probably take a few days to get it figured out. But do you know of any 12-year-old here that's like a computer whiz? And it'll be very embarrassing for us, but that kid will sit there and in 3 seconds will do what takes us 3 minutes. That's what I mean when I say you need to release your role to receive. So, likewise, all who are younger, be subject to the elders. It's very hard for young men, deacons, for example, to trust the elders because they keep on saying, you know what, these elders are dragging their feet. These elders don't do this. The elders aren't transparent. The elders, and there's a whole list. And as long as what you're doing this, you're breaking down the body, you're not building it up, and you're definitely not respecting what God is asking you to do, and you're violating at least 2 scriptures that I can quote you right now. It's not easy. How many of you thought you knew better than your parents? Anybody ready to admit they didn't? Well, later on, you've probably figured it out. But initially, we all think we're cleverer than the people that went on ahead of us. And we're not. There's a reason they've got the scars, the gray hair, and the crow's legs by the eyes, for the ladies to show it. Likewise, you are younger, be subject. Place yourself underneath those who are older. It is my theory that nothing is going to change in this world until the respect comes back from the younger generation to the older generation. Is it easy for college students to go and ask the elders? If the elders ask a deacon to do a job and the deacons say, well, I don't know how to do this, is it easy for them to go back to the elders and say, can you give me some advice for this? But that's exactly what he's asking you to do here. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility. And the word clothe yourselves, the item that you're using is the same garment that Jesus used when he took off his outer clothes and he put on that slave's garment and he started to wash the disciples' feet. When you clothe yourself with this garment and somebody looks at you, they can't see your normal clothes. They can't see your normal personality or temperament because humility is covering it. And so clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility. So the first part might have talked to the young men, but now it's talking to everybody with humility towards one another. Why? For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And I've got Proverbs 3:34 because that's where it comes from. And if you look it up, it won't say that. But if you type it onto a Google search engine and you say, what does the Septuagint say? Proverbs chapter 3:34, you'll get those exact words. So it's the Greek version of the Old Testament that is quoted over there. So the first one, serve with sacrifice, then surrender with security. And the second one, the idea is there that God will exalt you. So you could be okay with that. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. Why? So that at his timing, at the proper time, he may exalt you. One of the best pilots in 1969, July the 20th, maybe arguably the best pilot, was Neil Armstrong. And Neil Armstrong was piloting the Apollo down onto the moon. He had somebody back on Earth, Gene Kranz, who was wiser than what he was. Maybe not a better pilot, but definitely wiser than what he was. Could see things that Neil Armstrong couldn't see. And Neil Armstrong, what he could see was physically in front of him, and he could look at the computer, and the computer was whirring and making a horrible sound. It was completely overloaded as he was coming down to land. And he had a choice. Instinctively trust himself or listen to the wiser voice of somebody who has no idea what they're talking about because they can't see what he can see. And he listened to Gene. And Gene commanded these words, Eagle, you are go for landing. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an absolute command. Because yes, Gene could see things that Neil couldn't see. And because Neil decided not to trust himself, but the voice of authority in that situation, history was made. It would not have happened if he didn't let go of who he was. So number one, let go of your roles and then receive God's rule, which oftentimes will come to us in the form of our elders. And then finally, now you can go to 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. But you can't jump to it out of context. You must release your role to receive his rule, and then you will be able to rest in his care. And this beautiful verse that has sustained all of us in the most difficult of times, it will be yours. Casting all anxieties on him because he cares for you. casting all anxieties on him because he cares for you. The illustration I'm going to give now in closing is a sensitive illustration, and you might want to look away from the screen. It's of somebody who has endured cancer and is at the final stages. I'll just keep it up for 2-3 seconds. But for those of you who have successfully gone through it, it's going to mean a lot for you to see it, even just for a few seconds. And here it is. In other words, receive his peace, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. This lady, let's make her name Sarah. She got the diagnosis that she had cancer. And I'll put a few things in there to show you how difficult this can be. Her husband, John, had died a few years ago, and she was a widow. She had 3 children. John's salary was much more than hers. And yes, she had a few problems. She had this cancer diagnosis. She had to keep the mortgage going. And she had to contemplate the potential of her children growing up without a mom and a dad. How did she get through it? With tears in her eyes, she opened up that book. And the Bible opened up to where the ribbon was. And it was right over there. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. Cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you. And she took them, one at a time. And in prayer, she cast them. The awfulness of what cancer treatment could be, she cast. She literally said, God, I cast this to you. Paying the mortgage, where the money is coming from, I cast it to you. Worrying about the kids, having to grow up without a mom, already without a dad, she said, I cast it to you. 3 years later, you can find her in a church entrance hall. Big smile on her face and an incredible testimony. And you can ask her, how did you get through it? And she'll tell you about the story of how she cast it, everything. And she'll tell you she didn't just cast it that day. She had to keep casting it. And she'll tell you to this day she has to keep casting things to God. Cast all your anxieties upon him, for he cares for you. And she said, I found out something else. Not only do I cast it on him, but he takes it. He carries it from that moment on. Yes, the nights were still dark. Yes, she still had to have the surgery. But she knew how to get through it. So how do we get through it? Be very flexible with your roles. I would say release your roles. If you're normally the fixer-upper, you might need to be the support person and vice versa. If you're an elder that likes to do it on your own, stop doing that. Work with your other eldership members. Learn to listen to what they say. If you're on a school board, if you're the husband, or if you're any leadership role, if you're captain of a team, whatever it is, release the role that you think you need to take. And then receive from God his rule, and then rest in his peace. We had wonderful news as we saw one of our sisters being able to ring that bell on Friday. And you can only imagine the horrendous journey that she's been through to this point. But I know this is a family that loves deeply, and I know that she will be able to lean on our support a lot more. But how about you today? If I finish with a counseling session and I'm ready to release a client, and I ask them what helped the most, those that I'm ready to release, they will always tell me something like my faith or my prayers. I learned to read the Bible every day, or something like that. If you're ready right now to cast your burdens, Jesus is tenderly listening and he wants to help you. I invite you to leave the pews as we stand and come forward and take these pews and let us pray with you. And if you are subject to gospel invitation today, you want to be born again through the water and the Spirit, also I invite you, please come forward right now as together we stand and sing.